to let users sign up, we need to send a request to Firebase. And I'll manage that through a new provider in the off-dart file, which should, well, be there to manage all our user logic, signing up, logging in, logging out, and also making sure that when the app restarts, we try logging in the user again. So let's create a new class in there, our auth class, and here I will add the change notifier mixin from Flutter widget start so that we can call notify listeners to make sure that all places in the UI that depend on our auth logic here are updated when that changes. So in here, what do we need? We will definitely manage a token in there later to attach it to requests that reach endpoints which do need authentication. This token, haven't mentioned this before, but I'll mention it now, this token expires at some point of time. That's a security mechanism. This token doesn't live on forever. Typically, it expires after 1 hour. For example, the token Firebase generates expires after 1 hour. So 1 hour after you got it, it will be treated as invalid. So therefore, I'll also store a datetime object here, the expiry date of that token, essentially. Now, an additional piece of information that will be helpful is the ID of the logged in user. So I'll also store the user ID here, which should be a string. None of that is final, by the way, because all of that will be able to change across the lifetime of our application. We can log out, for example, and then all these fields would be cleared. Now with these properties set up there, let's start simple and let's add a method that allows us to sign the user up. So for that, I'll add a new method, and that will return a future which eventually will yield nothing, which I'll call sign up. And there I use the async keyword so that we can work with async await. Now, sign up will need two pieces of information, the email and the password. The confirm password is not required here. I only use this in the off screen in my form here in the validation already. It's just there to validate the input. I don't need to submit this to the server. So these are the two pieces of information that do need to reach the server. Now the question is, of course, which URL is the right URL to send that data to? To get an answer to this question, you can simply Google for Firebase auth REST API, and you should find an article from the official Firebase docs, and there you can learn how to authenticate with the help of the Firebase or with a certain Firebase REST API. Not the same API we used before, but a different API also provided by Firebase. On the right, you have shortcuts to the different parts of that documentation, and relevant for us is right now sign up with email and password, because that's exactly what we're trying to do. There you learn that you'll need to send a post request with some JSON data to this endpoint, to this URL. So unlike before in the last course module, now you can't build any URL you want. Instead, you have a fixed URL to which you need to send your request. And that's actually the default when working with APIs. Typically, you don't construct your own path, and that is then reflected back in a database. Typically, you have hard-coded endpoints to which you can send your data. So that's the case here. As a payload to the request, so as a body you attach, you need to send the email, the password, and then also an extra field which has the return secure token name written like this, which holds a boolean, and as you learn, this should always be true. So we just add that. And you'll get back a response which basically gives you the token. So here you already get a token after signing up. You don't even need to log in. We still need to implement the login, because if a user comes back after the token expired, then that user can't sign up again because a user for that email already exists. So then we'll need a login. But for the first time sign up, you already get back such a token thereafter. You get back the email. Well, you sent that there, so not really information you need, but still you get it back. You get a refresh token, which is an advanced concept which we'll not use in this module. This would allow you to prolong that token, which expires after an hour, so that the user doesn't have to log in again after an hour. I'll not cover using it here, because if you really want to use Firebase, you can look into its SDK, which manages this for you anyways, and I just want to show the general flow for which the normal token with the expiry date will suffice. You also get information when this will expire. It's a string, but in there you actually have the number of seconds until the ID token, so your main token here, expires. And local ID is the user ID, which Firebase automatically generates when you sign up a user. So that's the data you get back. This is the URL you need to send a request to. So back in the auth.dart file here, in the providers folder, let's import the HTTP package, because we'll of course send our request with that. And again, I'll import it as HTTP to have it all bundled up in this HTTP prefix here. So in here, we need a URL, and that URL is the URL I just copied from the docs. And please note that it has one dynamic segment in there, the API key. That is a key you get from your Firebase project. There, if you click on that gear icon under project settings, you find this web API key. And that's the key we use here, even though we're not in a web project. So take that key here and enter it here instead of the square bracket API key thing. So with that, you have that URL with your API key at the end, and that's the URL to which the request should be sent. So here we send a post request with the post method to that URL, and for the body, you need to, as you'll learn, send JSON data which contains this information. So here I'll again import my good old Dart convert package, which is built into Dart, to call JSON encode here, pass in a map, and in that map we need to have these three key value pairs. So we have email, we have password, and we have that, let me copy it to not mistype it, return secure token value. The value for that is true. For the password, the value of course is the password we're getting here as an argument. And for the email, the value also is the email we're getting here as an argument. So with that here, a couple of commas to reformat this, we have our map set up. Now, of course, the key values here actually have to be between quotes. Let's make sure that is the case. And now this can be sent as a post request. Right now, we're not waiting for the response though. So let's throw in an await here and actually store that in a variable. Now, we should add error handling here, and I'll do so in a second to make sure that we actually handle errors which could occur if you try to sign up for an email address that already is signed up. So that's something I'll take care about in a second. For the moment, let's simply print JSON decode response body to see what's in the body we get back. I mean, we already see it here, but to really see that this also worked and that we have that data here. Now we just have to call signup. And for that, we first of all have to provide this auth class or an object based on this auth class. Question as always is where? And the auth screen would be the right place if you really only want to send that request. Then we could definitely just wrap our main widget here, let's say this stack here or the scaffold here, we could wrap this with a widget with our change notifier provider widget. We could do that. That would be correct then, but actually we'll need auth data in different parts of the app as well, as it turns out. For example, soon we'll have to decide what our home screen should be. Should it be the auth screen, or if the user is logged in, it should actually be our product's overview screen. So we'll need information about the login status and also about the token and so on, basically in our entire app, and therefore we will provide it as so often here in main Dart. There in the multi-provider list here, I'll add another change notifier provider with a value, and the value I provide here, of course, is my instantiated auth object. Now, for this to work, however, we need to import that auth object. So let me go here and import from the providers folder the auth.dart file, so that we can create such an object based on the auth class here and provide that. Now with that, we can tap into this to send our sign up request here in the auth screen Dart. There in the submit method in our auth card state, I have login and sign up. So here in the sign up place, we want to use the provider package. So let's import it. Import package provider and then provider.dart to use that auth object and send such a request. So now down there, we can use provider auth for our auth object here, of course, for our auth class, and then pass in a context. Now, obviously, we need to import the auth Dart file from the providers folder to unlock the auth class here. So let's do that too. Let's add another import here at the top where we point at the providers folder and there the auth Dart file. With that imported, let's go down again to that sign up logic. Now this works. And now here we can call sign up and forward email and password, which we can get from our form data. Because please remember that in the end, all data is stored here in this auth data map. That's where the data gets stored by our form fields when save is called. So here we can forward auth data and then for the email key and here for the password key. These are the values we want to forward here. Now, also important, here we can also set listen to false because I don't really want to set up a listener to the auth state here in this widget. I don't care about the concrete auth state in this widget. I just want to dispatch my sign up action here. The auth state will then be important in other widgets, but not in this one actually. Because if I'm on the auth screen, I'm always unauthenticated. If that changes, I'll replace the entire screen. So inside of that screen, I don't care about changes. Also important, sign up of course returns a future because we're using async await in there. And hence we can also await here. You just have to make sure that you add async here on the submit method. And therefore this of course returns a future which eventually yields nothing. And then we can call await here, which is important to make sure that we also show the loading spinner in between. Now you can do a full refresh here and give this a try. For that, go to sign up mode and then enter email address, and it should be a valid one because whilst you can trick our local validation here, the Firebase server also has its own validation and will deny invalid emails. And also enter a password which is at least 6 characters long. Enter the same password here for confirming, and with that click sign up. You see the spinner, and then for now nothing, but here in your debug console you should see the response by Firebase, which looks pretty good. ID token is a pretty long string. That is this token string that is generated. You also see the email you entered again, you see the refresh token, and then the rest of the response is cut off because the token is so long, but this clearly proves that it in general worked. So now we're sending a sign up request. We can also see that it worked in the Firebase web console. There, if you go to the authentication area again, under users, click refresh if you don't see your user yet, and then you should see the user you just created. Here, by the way, you also can delete the user in case you want to test that creation flow again with the same email. This is how we sign a user up. The next step, of course, is that we also enable sign in before we then make sure that we change what we see on the screen based on the authentication flow. And of course, we also want to handle errors. That's also important because there's a lot that can go wrong when sending these sign up and login requests.